In this episode, you'll learn that dependency management is essential to delivering your projects on time and on budget. Hello and welcome back to the Project Management Podcast at pm-podcast.com. This is episode 515 and I'm Cornelius Fichtner. Thank you so much for stopping by. The video for this episode, by the way, is available at pm-podcast.com/515 or at pm-podcast.com/YouTube. And to all you YouTube viewers, remember to like and subscribe. It really helps. Well then, as project managers, we are often dealing with complex webs of tasks, timelines, and stakeholders. Managing dependencies effectively can mean the difference between a smooth, on-time delivery and a project that stalls or derails. Today, we're going to learn how to identify, agree on, plan, monitor, and communicate our dependencies so that you can keep everything on track and ensure that no surprises arise late in the game. Joining us from the United Kingdom, Swindon in Wiltshire to be precise, is Bryan Barrow, author of the book Dependency Management, who is a leading consultant helping organizations deliver complex projects, here to share his insights, strategies, and practical tips. And here he is. Bryan, welcome back. Nice to see you.
Lovely to see you and great to see you after all this time.
Yes, the last interview we did was audio only. Now we are on video and everybody can see me scratching my head right now. Wonderful. All right, first question to you, Barry. Usually always the same question. I'm going to twist it a little bit here for you. Why did you write the book and what can our audience expect to learn from our conversation here today?
Okay. Well, first off, I wrote the book because I believe that dependency management is an aspect of project management that is important but overlooked. And to be honest with you, I did not intend to write a book on dependency management. I was intending to write a chapter for a completely different book. And what I normally do is I write what I know and what I do. And then I go online and do a bit of research to see if I've missed anything significant. And when I did, what I found that most things that I saw about dependency management had to do with task relationships or logical dependencies. And that was kind of it. It was not the way I thought about it. To me, dependency management is about building relationships with people who you need to work with and collaborate with. So that's why I wrote the book. It took me a few days thinking that I was missing something. And then I realized there was just a gap in terms of the available literature. And what I hope that people get from this is the importance of managing proactively project dependencies, that dependency management is more about people and relationships than it is about tasks, and that clear and open communication is essential to managing dependencies properly.
Wonderful.
Those three things.
Thank you very much. As always, we are currently live on Facebook, LinkedIn, YouTube, and X. And if you are joining us from there, and if you have a question about dependency management, please type it into the chat and we will answer it right here live in our call. All right. Let's begin with the easiest and probably hardest question there is. Bryan, let's define this a little bit. Why is dependency management important? Why did you find that as you were writing that chapter?
Well, if we think about what dependency is, it's a relationship between two things where the latter needs something from the former in order to be completed. And in order to deliver projects, we've got an entire collection of people, activities, resources, relationships that we need to manage, as well as constraints. And dependency management gives projects and organizations the tools to do that, to manage that collection of complex relationships, activities, and so on. So that's why dependency management matters.
All right. Thank you very much. And from here, we have decided to do something slightly different and go to this slide here, to this question here, because we all love to hear about common traps that we could avoid, and what solutions there are. So we decided to start out with the top, I believe, 3 mistakes
Yeah, top
that
three.
we all make in dependency management, and then also how to avoid them. So, Bryan, what have you found? What are these top 3 mistakes, and what are your recommendations? How do we avoid them?
Well, if I focus on just three, I think those three are one, not identifying the full range of dependencies that your project has, which means that you end up with a false picture of what needs to be done, and that just stores up problems for the future. And those problems can come back to you as perhaps unmanaged risks. It could come back as surprises. It could come back as necessary scope changes. The second is not communicating dependencies to sponsors and stakeholders at the appropriate time, and I mean throughout the life of your project. And that means that people may not fully understand what's going on or what's going wrong. The third one is not holding stakeholders and collaborators to account. And that means that even if you think you have an arrangement or an agreement to have some work done, which involves a dependency that needs to be managed, at the critical time, usually at the wrong time, and quite often too late, you realize that something's not going to happen, and that can cause you to go into some perhaps delay or into dispute. And it's not just that you can be inconvenienced or delayed by a late delivery of a dependency or non-fulfillment of that. You could have people that are dependent on you. And so you can end up with this domino effect where something that you're dependent on slows you down, you slow someone else down, and it may not be perhaps your fault, but you do cause other people impacts. So those are the top three: not identifying the full range of dependencies, not clearly communicating dependencies to sponsors and stakeholders, and not holding stakeholders and collaborators to account.
Mm-hmm. And many of our listeners often don't have enough time to focus on 3 things. If you had to pick just one, which of these 3 would you say, focus on this one first? That is, from my, Bryan Barrow's opinion, that's the number 1.
Well, I would say go for the one in the middle. And okay. The reason why I go for communication is that you always need to be communicating what you're doing, what you think you're doing, what challenges you have. So you're always going to be needing to communicate, report, escalate. The more you start to know about dependencies, the more you can communicate, and you may not recognize them at the outset. So you're always going to be learning new things, progressing some changes, maybe having to change your plans or accommodate changes to other people's plans. But you have to be communicating while you do that so that people understand what's happening. And it also ensures that you stay as aligned with others as possible.
Mm-hmm. All right. And at this point, if you have been scribbling furiously, I need to write these 3 down, and you would like this maybe in a nicer format, I have good news for you, because Bryan has provided us with a PDF handout where he has these top 3 issues with his recommendations of what you can do in order to avoid them. And give us a few moments. We'll tell you where you can download that PDF document later on in our conversation here. And now, before we move on to this here on the screen, I would like to bring up this tip here from Corinna Martinez, who says, "Thank you for finally addressing the gap. I have been told that it doesn't matter, I guess dependency management, to the detriment of project completion and at time quality of outcomes. Now I can point to your book." And yes, Corinna, at the end, I'll tell you exactly what the book is, and you'll see the cover and everything. So that is coming up later on. Right. So since we're talking about the book, the core of the book follows the process that you see right here on the screen in this graphic. Identify, agree, plan, validate, monitor, and communicate dependencies. And that is also how we are going to tackle the topic from here on forward. We're going to go through these 6, I believe, steps. And so we are starting with identifying and agreeing on dependencies. Those are the first two there. Bryan, how do you recommend that teams identify dependencies early on, and why is this critical for project success?
Okay. Well, the reason why I believe we should, the way that I think we should go about identifying dependencies, start with the basics, reviewing project documentation, the business case, your charter, any project initiation documentation, as well as any source documents. Talk to people, stakeholders, and others who may have a role to play. While you're doing that, present back your understanding of what your project involves and what it needs to do. You can do that in a load of ways. It could be diagrams, it could be documents and artifacts, it could be drawings, it could be context diagrams. Play back what you're learning, because as you do that, you'll start to involve other people. You're sharing your understanding of the project. Some people may not be aware that they have a role to play in your project. That's particularly true of, let's say, resource managers who may have a resource pool, let's say, of software engineers or business analysts. They have a number of projects that they deal with and whose resources they supply. So they may not be aware of your project and your impending needs. So the sooner you start to speak to people and let them know what you need from them, and vice versa, the better. And it's critical for project success, because the sooner you involve people in recognizing dependencies, the better. And the outcomes of what you're learning go into your project schedule. It goes into budgeting and resourcing information. It also helps you to identify risks, and you can start to build your dependencies log as you go.
Mm-hmm. Wonderful. In your book, you say the following, and I quote here: people think about dependencies the wrong way. People think about dependencies the wrong way. Why do you say that?
Well, I said earlier that I was working on a chapter in a book, and the book, I suppose I should share. I'm an American football fan.
Yes, you wrote the Product Manager's Playbook, right?
Right.
Yes.
So while I was working on one, so I was originally working on one of those chapters, and that's when I had this, what I saw as a revelation, which was there's not much out there on dependency management. If you do a Google search, or other search engines will apply, and just type in project dependencies, what you'll see is a lot of information about task or logical relationships, finish to start, start to finish, start to start, maybe some internal and external, inbound or outbound. It's completely focused around tasks. So let me use a small analogy. If we think about a relay race, everyone can kind of appreciate that the aim of a relay race is to complete the races in as short a time as possible, where you hand off a baton.
Yeah, don't drop it. Yes.
You don't want to drop it. You don't want to have a bad handoff. A bad handoff can cause you time that ultimately loses you the race. Now, that's only, if you think about it from a project perspective, what we're talking about here is just the implementation phase of a much bigger project. The relay race project, if you're, let's say, going to be entering a team into the Olympics, starts maybe a few years in advance. It starts off with a decision to enter the race. It includes the selection of the athletes that are going to participate and their backups. It includes the recruitment of coaches, administrators, support staff. It includes venues for training. It includes so much more. It includes getting the final selected athletes to the venue.
It's not about that moment where the baton is handed over. It's everything around it. I get it. Okay.
So I was talking to a friend of mine, a PMP project consultant based in the US, and we were talking about doing some stuff around stakeholder management. I said, yeah, but I'm going to do this dependency management thing first. I think it's really important. And so we got chatting about the way I saw it. And I said, to me, there are 7 types of dependency. And I'm sure I'll remember 6 and forget the 7th. Task is the first one. But if you think about a schedule, you've got a series of tasks. Each of those tasks needs to be done by people. And if they're not part of your direct project team or resources that you control, you need to secure the resources from somewhere. It could be inside your organization. It could be another team. It could be subject matter experts. It could be people in another organization entirely. You may need resources or facilities in order to do that. It could be consumables, commodities. It could be training rooms. It could be other assets. You also need funding. in order to cover your costs. And you need to make sure that your funding base is actually as wide or wider than your project funding is going to be. You also need support. And by support, I mean the support of senior and other stakeholders. You need the support of collaborators and contributors to the project. You even need the support of people in the organization who don't know anything about your project, but they may stand to lose or gain by it. You also need time. And we all know that if you start a project off with inadequate time, you're already under pressure to deliver. And finally, you need a team, and you need team-based thinking. And that means both your nuclear team, your team, but also the extended team of people who participate. So that's the way I think about dependency management. And all of those things are reflected in your project schedule if you build it in the right way. But if you don't focus on that, you may end up doing what a lot of people do, which is they'll use something like a scheduling tool and just use it as a drawing package. Or even worse, like 1/3 of people, you'll use a spreadsheet, and then you're setting yourself up for likely failure.
Yeah. All right. As a reminder, we're talking about identifying and agreeing on dependencies. We've discussed identifying, and you mentioned the team. So let's talk about agreeing here. What is the best approach to getting team members and the stakeholders to agree on the dependencies?
Okay. Well, first I should say that in that that diagram, I've got 5 steps and a 6th central one, which is about communicating.
Yeah, let me bring it back up here so that everybody can see it. Yes.
Yeah, and what you'll see is I've used identifying dependencies as a separate stage from agreeing them. And the reason for that is as you go through identifying what you think are potential dependencies and creating a log, before getting into jumping with your heavy boots on into planning, you've got to get agreement. So you've got to agree with other people that there's a dependency. After all, we're talking about a relationship between 2 things. And I'm not talking at the level of the task. I'm talking at the basis of the people or projects. So for me, the best way to get agreement is to start communicating what you know early, asking people for feedback, asking people for their contributions. Because you start to involve them in your work and your thinking. You also get to show them that you are considering their needs. So ask them what they need from you. If you need something from someone, you can say, well, what do you need from me? Or when do you need me to deliver something for you? That applies to team members, where you can ask your team, well, what's likely to get in your way? You can speak to your stakeholders and ask them for what they need from you in order to contribute. So you can also take that to the extent of organizing, whether you have those conversations. Sometimes one-on-one works really well, or in small groups. But that doesn't mean you shouldn't hold dependency management workshops to play back what you've learned, to get more feedback, and ultimately to form the basis for future activities.
All right. Thank you very much. We are moving on to the next 3 processes, have them all on one slide here: planning, validating, and monitoring dependencies. But before we do that, Neru Nagapan says, amazing tips. I'm glad.
Thank you.
I'm glad we can be amazing. Wonderful. Bryan, how do you recommend teams incorporate dependency planning into their overall project plans so that nothing slips through the cracks? Let's focus on that. Yeah.
Well, I think the way that we can incorporate people and also the work that they need to do into the plans. One, as you probably know, I'm a big advocate of collaborative planning, of getting people into one room or one space where you get the same shared understanding of what the project's goal is, where you can start to build out the plan at a high level, but down to the level of key work streams and milestones, but also the products that need to be delivered to evidence the milestones. If you do that as a group, you're starting to build one single plan rather than individual plans, which perhaps perpetuates silo working. But you're also starting to get people to talk about where they see the interdependencies between, let's say, work streams or between different parts of the project. So that's, to me, the first part of doing that. So working in collaboration wherever you can, using that as a way of identifying where you may have key dependencies, either inbound or outbound. The next part of it for me is around starting to build your schedule itself. So if you've already started to build out what you see as tasks, you can start to identify the resources that you might need. But for me, the thing that makes the difference is starting to link the dependencies that you have to the work that needs to be done. And if you do that correctly in your schedule, what you'll end up with is you'll end up with a project schedule which you can use as the basis of what-if analysis. So if someone says, well, I've had a change of plan, I'm going to be a week late in delivering something, is that going to be a problem? But more importantly, as you update your schedule, week on week, you can start to see whether there are maybe downstream impacts if things change.
All right. Right now, we're talking about planning, validating, and monitoring. This covered planning. What do you actually mean by validating? Is it just making sure that you have the right dependencies, or what exactly is happening in this particular area?
Well, if I take it in terms of, let's say, the four steps, one is identifying potential dependencies. So you can have a long list of potential dependencies. Some of them may be really easy to let's say, to get agreement to. So you might have something where you have to place an order and there's a 2-week lead time. So the dependency is really on yourself to place the order. And I've had in my past horrendous lessons learned, which I talk about in the book, where because of a lack of familiarity, I didn't allow enough of a lead time on some ordering of medical device equipment. It was nobody else's fault but my own. So because I thought that I didn't have to allow 6 weeks, I thought it was maybe 3, I ended up potentially being late and impacting the rest of the project, which was my own. So first you've got the identification piece, and some of the dependencies may be a bit, let's say, more of an unknown. But then you need to have conversations with people to agree them. You then need to have conversations to work out when, let's say you and I, Cornelius, I'm dependent on you for something. You can tell me when you can deliver it to me. But it may also be that I need to do something with it before I hand on to someone else. So we can end up with almost like a triangular relationship between you, me, and someone downstream of me. There may be other things going on in my project that mean that the dates I need to get agreement on, I may need to come back to you and say, could you do that a little bit earlier? Because if you can, then it will mean that I can deliver something for someone else. And that to me is the validating step. So I can incorporate something into my plans, but I don't want to baseline it until I've got agreement from all parties who are relevant as to what they can do. And you might need to go around that process a few times. It may take, a bit of shuttling back and forth to say, well, I can move this to here. What can you do? What can you do? The validating step is where we all, in effect, sign up to say, this is what we're doing for each other.
Mm-hmm. So that was the planning and validating steps. Moving on to monitoring here, you mentioned that potentially triangular connection that we have there. Can you share one or two practical techniques or tools that you like to use in order to monitor those dependencies? It seems like, that there are hundreds of dependencies between individual tasks. How do I keep track of it? How do I make sure that, nothing falls between the cracks here?
Okay, so there are a couple of things that I quite often do. One is around the updating and maintenance of the dependency map and the dependency logs, so that people have the dependency map, a very high level view of my project and the key dependencies, both inbound and outbound, and who's responsible for them. The dependency log is a bit more detailed, and this is where we have the information, what the dependencies are, who owns them, what's happening with them, what the results are, and just making sure that I update those and publish those and send those out on a regular basis helps me to keep everyone informed of what's happening. But the other thing I do, and I've been doing for a long time, which again was part of my confusion, saying, well, why aren't more people doing this? In my project schedule, I always break it into 3 sections. The first section, right at the top, is the key project milestones. And those key project milestones, and they may be broken down by work streams, just have enough information for senior managers to understand the project on one page. Some people refer to things like that as a plan on a page. So I can have 5 work streams. It may be 3 or 4 milestones per work stream. It may be a few more than that. But that one page should have enough information for people to understand what the project's about. The second section of the plan is my key project dependencies, and I break those into 2 groups, inbounds and outbounds. And those dependencies are linked to the detail in my plan. That way, if any of my, let's say, project tasks slip and they impact a dependency, I can see that the outbound dependencies will start to move to the right. Similarly, if an inbound dependency is going to be late and it impacts some of my work, I can see how that can impact my work and whether it also impacts a downstream dependency. The prerequisite for that is a plan that you can use, which where all of the tasks and activities are joined up, and that is updated on a regular basis. But once you have that, you have everything that you need to monitor and communicate what's going on in one place. You've got your key project milestones, you've got your inbound and outbound dependencies, and the next section of the plan is the detail. So all of the activities and tasks which I'm working on, and they're linked to inbound and outbound dependencies.
All right, wonderful. So those were the first, I believe, 5 of these processes. We have 2 more to go. Communication and something else. I don't remember the last one already. But before we go there, I want to make good on my promise. This here, let me move this to the side here. This here is the link where you can download the handout from Bryan, and you can see the handout on the screen as well here. It is at pm-podcast.com/515. This is episode 515, so it will be in the show notes of this episode. So pm-podcast.com/515. And now from here, we're moving on to accountability. There we go. I knew there were 2 left, communication and accountability. Bryan, let me take this into a slightly different area. What is the relationship between dependency management and what we generally talk about as power skills? Leadership, negotiation, facilitation, which are all part here of communication.
Yeah, so if we think about the Project Management Institute, and I think it's last year's Pulse of Profession, and over the last few years, they've been looking much more now at power skills, those skills and abilities and behaviors that facilitate working with others and help people deliver. And in their view, in consultation with their membership, they've identified 4 key power skills: communicating with others, problem solving, collaborative leadership, and strategic thinking. And in my view, all of those are facilitated by dependency management, communicating with others about what you intend to do, what they intend to do, and so that everyone's got clarity, which promotes accountability. Problem solving is such an essential part of dependency management, because the moment your project starts moving, so do other people's projects start moving, and they don't all move at the same time and the same pace. So sometimes you need to come back together and say, well, I've got a problem. I'm going to be a few days late. Will that cause you an issue? It may be it does. It may be that I need to do something in my project to help to get people back on track, or to change track, to help so that we all deliver at the same time. Collaborative leadership, I think, is part of making sure that we're working collectively as an extended team. It's also empowering your own team, but opening up and recognizing that you don't have all the answers and that you might not be right. So making sure that you're listening to others and working together. And finally, strategic thinking, which I think is more around looking beyond your own individual project needs and sometimes looking at the needs of the wider organization. I've been in positions in the past with projects where I've had a need to do something, and it might have required resources, but another project had a priority call on those resources. And I said, hey, I'm okay to stand back and wait for you to do what you need to do. I've also in the past given up resources that I already had secured in my project because someone else needed them more than I did, even though I needed them. But as long as that was communicated why I was doing it and made sure that it was sanctioned by my project sponsors, I was happy to do that. So I'm more for the organization cause rather than making sure that I win. So
Right.
just to wrap up, whether you call them power skills, soft skills, or interpersonal skills, the ability to communicate with others, work together to solve problems, work together as an extended team, and look to the wider needs of the organization, all part and parcel of dependency management.
All right. Now, let's talk about accountability. Because for most of us, when we work on a project, we feel accountable for the task that has been assigned to us. I need to get this finished by that point in time. But I have never heard anybody talk about you are also accountable for the dependency. Is this the missing piece in this? Is this the type of accountability that you are referring to?
Yes and no. Yes,
Okay.
I would. Well, if I think about the yes part, I'm responsible for my project, for everything that I need to deliver.
Yes.
And to me, that also includes all of my outbound dependencies. So anyone who's dependent on me, I should be fully accountable for delivering that. So if I agree with someone that they've got a delivery date, let's say of the end of March, and we've agreed that I need to deliver by then, I need to make sure I do whatever I can to deliver by that date so that anything that I'm supposed to be providing to someone else, I maintain that commitment. Sometimes, though, I may be impacted by a project which is upstream of me. So if someone who I'm dependent on is late, that can put pressure on my project and also on any of my downstream dependencies. And that was the no part. So I'm not responsible for the people who are upstream of me. I am responsible for delivering for the people downstream. But the other part of it is about just making sure that people are able to stick to their commitments. And it goes both ways. It's not just the commitments that I have on other people. I have to remember that other people are dependent on me as well. So a lot of the talk about dependency management is it almost feels like what people need to do for me, but it's actually more about what I need to do for other people. No one else will know what my dependencies are more than I will.
What is your best advice to getting people to deliver on their commitments? Most of us, we work now in cross-functional matrix organizations. We have colleagues all over the world. Okay, so we're almost getting into what is the magic behind getting this done. Do you have a recommendation here?
I'll say this. I don't think there's any magic. I think what there is clarity and openness of purpose. There is open conversation around what could be done and what should be done, to the point where we involve people. So one of the things I do, for example, if I'm working with, let's say, an external team, I'll share with them my plans, my proposed plans. I'll get feedback from them on whether they think my plan is reasonable. I'll try and identify what I need from them and when they can deliver. I will also try and work out what they need from me in order to deliver. So, for example, if I need to place an order by a certain point in order to have a delivery, then I'll want to know what the lead time is. I might want to know what opening and closing hours are. I might want to know about special delivery instructions. I'm just working through some thoughts there. Mm-hmm. But ultimately, I need to be as clear and specific about what I want to achieve and what help I need. A lot of people will be very happy to do what you ask them to, because you're the first person that's asked them clearly and specifically with enough time and notice to be able to respond. Walking up to someone, let's say on a Friday afternoon, and saying I need something by Monday morning is never helpful. But it does happen. But giving someone, let's say, 3 months notice, or saying, I want to try and do this, how much notice do I need to give you in order for you to be able to deliver to me? For a lot of people, say, oh, it's easy. I've got a 5-day turnaround. Do it by a week before and you can get it. It doesn't have to be difficult, but it just has to be done. The other part about accountability, though, is reminding people periodically that they've agreed to do something for you. and just saying, is there any change? Are you still on target? How's your project going? So catching up with someone maybe over a coffee, real or virtual, sending out reminders every now and again to let people know what they're supposed to be doing. Because remember, things change. People come and go, priorities within the organization may change, projects may be impacted by things that are outside of their control, and that includes the people that you're dependent on. But as long as you understand and are aware, it helps to keep people accountable. The other part of it, though, is being accountable yourself. So I always look at my plans and my schedules and say, if I said I'll do it, I'll do it. And if someone can trust me to deliver what I say I will, that promotes trust, and I think it promotes reciprocity. So if I'll do this for you, you'll do this for me.
All of this got me thinking about culture, the culture of dependency management. So before we get to the takeaways, allow me to close with this question here. How can we as project leaders encourage a culture of transparency around dependency so that nothing is hidden or assumed?
Okay, it's probably three things to do that I would see as important. One is be as transparent as you can in your dealings with people, whether it's publishing documentation to your stakeholder communications portal, including your project schedule, dependency map and dependency logs, all of those things that help people to understand what you're trying to achieve. Be as open as you can and publish as much of it as you can. People might not want to read it, but at least the information is available. Number two, try to assist people in their projects. So if you know that someone that you're dependent on has a problem, try and work with them to solve the problem. Now, I'm not saying, and I'm not advocating that you take responsibility for the problems of the world. I'm just saying, if you're dependent on someone and they have a challenge, see if you can accommodate it without sacrificing your own project objectives. You can do that. It builds up a lot of goodwill. And I think the third one, if you have a problem with dates that don't align, see what you can do to resolve that problem without personalizing it. It can be very easy to point fingers at someone and say, well, I couldn't do my thing because they didn't do theirs. It's much better to work together and say, look, we found that we've got a problem and we're working together to resolve it. And that promotes trust. And trust is a really valuable commodity in projects. If someone knows that they can trust me to do something, if I know I can trust someone else to do something, I can feel a lot more relaxed and focus my attention on where I think I've got bigger problems.
Excellent. All of this takes us to our takeaways. Bryan, what are the two, maybe three takeaways from our conversation that you want our audience to think about and start applying on their own dependency management?
Okay, I'll go for three rather than two. The first one, and I think it was Corinna who, thank you very much for your comment earlier. It just shows that I'm not the only one and neither are you. So the three are, the first one, don't just assume that dependencies will manage themselves. Get started early on identifying them and on the people you need to work with to arrange them and to manage them. Number two, make communications the heart of what you do. As I said earlier, it's, to me, dependency management is more about the people whose dependencies need to be managed than the dependencies or the tasks themselves. So have open conversations with people about your work and where you may need their help and about how you can help them, and to be specific about what you need, and again, transparent in your dealings with them. And the third one, monitoring dependencies doesn't have to be difficult, but it does have to be done. Review your dependencies on a regular basis. I would typically review my schedule every week. I would review my dependencies every month, and I would update my dependencies log, I say, every month, and I would review it once a quarter. And that sort of cadence, a week, a month, and a quarter, gives me enough time to start to think of my dependency log, my dependency map, as almost like a long-range scan. If I'm looking ahead and saying, well, in 2 months' time, this needs to happen, I can talk to people to say, okay, is it still on target? So those three: manage dependencies, communication at the heart of what you do, and make sure you're monitoring them and communicating what you find.
Wonderful. Bryan, thank you very much for coming back onto the program and
Thank you.
introducing us to dependency management and how important it all is. Thank you.
Thank you for the invite. It's been great to be here.
Wonderful. And thank you, everybody, for joining us here today. As a reminder, the book is called Dependency Management, 75 Quick and Easy Tips to Eliminate Barriers to Your Project Success. It is written by and self-published by Bryan Barrow, and it's just shy of about 230 pages in length. Please visit pm-podcast.com/515 for show notes, transcripts, and PDU information. And yes, you can earn PDUs for this episode. Now, we're just shy of about 45 minutes here, so you can't really claim the 3/4 of a PDU for listening to this episode. You can only claim half a PDU, but if you go to pm-podcast.com/515, you download the handout from Bryan and you spend 5 minutes going through that, reviewing it and learning from it, then you have a total of 45 minutes and you can claim 0.75 PDUs in the category of ways of working. And finally, we have this. If I had $1 for every unexpected dependency, then I could fund a project to eliminate all dependencies. How ironic. Until next time.